So after years of resisting, I finally picked up the EOS R6. Now I've had a crazy amount of questions on why I picked up the EOS R6 over picking up either the R5, the R5C, the C70. I have some very specific reasons why I'm using the R6 in 2022 over a lot of the other Canon features. This is really going to be more of my reasoning, but you may be in a similar boat to me, so that's kind of why I'm making today's review video. Is the EOS R6 worth it in 2022? And my answer is, for my uses, absolutely. But let's see if it works for you. So no, I didn't sell my RED Komodo after picking up the R6. However, I did sell all of my Blackmagic pocket cameras. I was doing a lot less multicam work. I was using those cameras a lot for YouTube work, smaller end gigs, and after using the FX3 and the Sony a7S III for a bit, I knew that moving in the mirrorless direction was absolutely the way I needed to go. Now, some reasonings for the R6. Number one, I had the RED Komodo, which is an RF mount camera. Over the past few years, I've picked up multiple RF lenses. I have RF to EF adapters with VND. Going the RF route made the most sense, so that's why I picked Canon over Sony specifically on that end, especially because when it comes to autofocus, when it comes to image quality, they are really close when it comes to Sony and Canon. It's hard to pick a winner. It really just depends on what you're shooting and also, really most importantly, your lens selection. I think if you're using all Canon lenses, even if it's EF lenses, I think still going Canon makes the most sense, although there's some great adapters to use on Sony cameras. Obviously, if you're using Sony E-mount, going the Sony route makes the most sense because you can't use those lenses on any other system. So I picked up the Canon R6 because of the autofocus. I also picked it up because of its 10-bit 4K. It has 10-bit 4K up to 4K 60, and it shoots in its IPB compressed video codec. Now, that's the most compressed video codec that Canon offers that is 10-bit. They have it on the R6, they have it on the R5, the R5C, the R7 that's coming out. It is the most compressed, which is why I wanted it, because you have really small file sizes. Now, to combat that on the other end, there's why I picked up an Atomos Ninja 5, because using the Atomos Ninja 5, whether it's the R6, R5, R7 that's coming out, even the R5C, you get a 4K signal out of the HDMI that's uncompressed. So you can record at a much higher bitrate on this recorder and still use something like a Canon R6. That was part of the reason that I picked it up, because compared to the R5, R5C, a lot of those higher end video features I have on the RED Komodo, and I like the raw video codec on the RED Komodo a lot better, so that pretty much took the R5 and the R5C out off the gate. Also, with the chip shortage, getting the R5C is a little bit harder right now. I noticed getting the Canon R6 and the R5 seemed to be easier than pretty much a lot of the other camera options out there. I think because a lot of people were scared away with the initial overheating problem that these cameras first had when they were originally released. I'll tell you that those overheating problems have been severely fixed. I really never experienced overheating ever. You may notice I said really never, so obviously I have experienced it sometimes, and those sometimes that I've experienced overheating was really when I was shooting 4K 60 for extremely long periods of time. My guess is because the R6 is always downsampling from 5.5K, doing that in the 4K 60 mode probably takes up a lot of processing power and causes the camera to overheat. But even when I had the overheating in the 4K 60 mode, if I switched over to 1080p, those overheating signs would go away. Isn't the best solution, and it never really happens that much, especially now that I've learned to flip between 4K 24 and 4K 60. But it is worth noting that the camera still can overheat, but it's nowhere near the issue it was when the camera was originally released. Thanks to firmware magic, the EOS R6 also has C-Log 3, which is Canon's best log color gamut right now, and it is in pretty much all of their higher-end cameras, and the addition to C-Log 3 is what made the R6 a much better camera in my opinion. So the EOS R6 has 4K 60 in 10-bit, it has internal image stabilization, it's got class-leading autofocus with dual Pixel 2 autofocus. The R6 also has 2 SD card slots, so if you are recording internally, the recording media is obviously not only much cheaper, but you can also do dual recording at the same time if that's a feature that you need. As I said, it's got the clean HDMI out. It's got pretty decent battery life for a camera its size. So in the end, would I consider the Canon R6 a professional video camera? I would consider it a professional video camera, but I think in the end it depends on what you're filming. You know, with the Red Komodo, I think if you're actually making films, working on higher end productions, the Red Komodo makes a lot of sense for those. But on a lot of lower end productions, if you're doing a lot of YouTube or web work, I think getting a camera like the R6 makes a lot of sense just because of the workflow. It just is a lot quicker. Now, it's a lot quicker in every aspect, except for its video codec on the R6. Because you're shooting an IPB, a lot of older computers can't really deal with that codec, which is probably the #1 reason a lot of people use the Atomos Ninja V in order to record ProRes, as that is way easier to edit on your computer. Now, when I'm out there and I'm shooting YouTube videos, or really just videos that I need a super slim profile if I'm filming myself, or for whatever reason I just can't justify putting the Atomos Ninja on top of the R6, or I just can't rig out the R6 because I need it to be super compact, which is a huge bonus of this camera, well then I'm going to deal with the IPB codec because it still is really good image quality. In fact, after using the Atomos Ninja V, I could say that unless you're shooting super fast moving objects, the image quality really isn't too much different from the IPB inside the camera to the external recorded video. Again, if you're not shooting super fast moving subjects. It is worth noting, if you're a photographer and you really want that higher megapixel count, you're not going to get that on the R6, but as many of you know with me, I pretty much exclusively stick to video. I shoot photos for fun. So having high megapixels on the photo side really didn't matter as much. Now, there is a benefit to not having super high megapixels on the R6, and that is when it comes to low light video. The low light is better on the R6 compared to the R5, the R5C. It has to do with pixel density, and when you have less megapixels on a much bigger sensor area, which then ends up giving you better low light when it comes to ISO performance. So you get about a stop better low light on the R6 compared to the R5. And when it comes to the R7, there's no question the R6 will be much better in low light than the R7. Now, the R6 has a headphone jack, it has a microphone jack. I pretty much just use the Atomos Ninja V now if I'm pairing it with the Red Komodo and I need 2 cinema camera type setups. If I'm just doing talking head videos or I'm going out and I'm doing YouTube videos, I bring the camera in its most simplest configuration. A lot of the times I'll even take it out of the cage and I'll put it in this little rubber protection. It really just saves the body from getting scratched up when I put it in my bag. But for doing YouTube content, especially filming myself, having the smallest, lightest setup makes the most sense. Now, while I'm out doing YouTube, it depends on what lens I'm using, but the image stabilization, as amazing as it is, I notice it works the best when using telephoto lenses. If you're using super wide angle lenses like Canon 16mm, if you have IBIS on, you'll notice I get warping in a lot of my vlogging videos. Now, I put up with it, but obviously it is there, and so it's nice to eliminate it when you can, but when you're shooting very wide on the R6, the R5, it's hard not to get that weird IBIS wobble. It happens in a lot of cameras that have IBIS, but the R6 is no exception. It does have it as well when shooting super wide. If the question is whether you want to get the R6, I think you have to ask yourself a few questions. Is this going to be your main camera? Is this going to be your only camera? Do you shoot mostly video? Do you shoot mostly photos? And once you go through those questions, I think the answer is if it's going to be your only camera for photo and video, if you are considering yourself to be a professional, you may want to go that leap above and go for something like the Canon R5. There also is the R7 that was just announced, where if you don't need full frame at all, the R7 is $1,000 less, pretty much offers all of the same video specs, and even offers a downscaled 7K video mode that outputs a 4K video file on the R7, so that's pretty neat as well. Verdict's still out on the dynamic range. We don't know if it's similar to the R6, better, worse. It's either going to be the same or worse, most likely. But the R7, again, is $1,000 less. It's an APS-C sensor. So if you're shooting with Super 35 lenses like I've been for the past few years, especially using the Red Komodo, the Pocket 6K, well then the R7 may make a lot more sense for you. I think if the R7 was out when I was looking to buy the R6, I probably would not have purchased the R6. Not that it's a bad camera, and I absolutely don't regret buying it, but when I got the R6, other than the RF lenses that I had to go out and get some full-frame EF lenses just to get some really professional quality lenses that I could use when I want to pair the R6 with the Komodo. Couldn't use any of my Super 35 lenses because they all electronically communicate with the camera. And if you use Super 35 lenses or APS-C lenses on the R6, it forces you to shoot in its crop video mode. I did a video on it that goes into it a little bit more. I'll put a link in the description below. But essentially, the crop video mode, the video quality is nowhere near as good as the full frame video mode on the EOS R6. One of the cameras I'm looking at to pair with the R6 is actually not the R7 now, and it's the R10, which is the basically cheapest RF camera that's now available. It does shoot 10-bit in 4K 24p, 30p, and it may do 4K 10-bit at 60, although I know that camera has a heavy crop, but it doesn't have C-Log or anything. It does an HDR P and Q mode, but what speaks to me is it doesn't have IBIS, which a lot of people want IBIS, especially for video and photo, but if you take the R6 and let's say you want to put it on a car mount and you want to rig it on the outside of a car, well, because it has IBIS, it's going to mess with the footage because that sensor is not locked in place. It magnetically moves around. So if it has a lot of shake on the camera itself, it will affect the video footage. Whereas I can take a cheapo camera like the R10 and I can put it on the same rig and actually get better quality video. So I am looking at the R10 as a secondary camera to the R6. In some of those situations, I can actually use the Red Komodo because it isn't stabilized either. However, at that point, you're putting a much more expensive rig in a much more dangerous situation, especially someone like me where the Red Komodo is my A camera. It's not a secondary camera like it's meant to be in Red's lineup. So for me, that secondary camera or that crash camera could be the R10, so we'll see. Overall, I've really been enjoying the R6. I think it's a fantastic camera in 2022 if you're going to use it for its strengths. I think it's not the best camera for everybody. However, you can use that argument for a lot of different cameras. So before I leave you today, I want to talk about a few of the upcoming videos I have that are related to the EOS R6. So first, I am working on a review for the Atomos Ninja V. This is the first Ninja V, not the Ninja V Plus. And the reason I got it and am working on a review is there's a recent price reduction in this. So now it's $400 and you can snag them even cheaper used. And they bring a lot of value if you're using an EOS R6, and I'll go into all of that in the review of not only the Ninja V, but using it with the EOS R6. Another R6 specific review are these clip-in filters I have right here from Kolari. And what they do is these are mist filters. They also have ND filters with mists, and you can put these in front of your camera sensor. These ones are specifically made for the R5 and the R6, so you have to see if your camera is supported. But you put them right in front of your sensor, and you can now have internal ND filters with using RF lenses, which is huge. It's part of the reason that I haven't been using RF lenses quite as much, because I like being able to use the VND adapter so I can dial in the ND. I mean, even right now, I'm using the R6 with the Sigma 24-70, but I am using Canon's VND adapter. Now, speaking of VND adapter, yes, I do have my Komodo back in my hands. I just got it yesterday, and I have a new VND adapter from Kolari as well. And I will be testing this out on both the Red Komodo and the EOS R6. On the Red Komodo, I've heard really good things, but the Red Komodo doesn't have quite the autofocusing system like the R6, so we're really going to put it to the test on the R6 as well. So that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments below. And if you got knowledge and value out of today's video, please make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell to keep up to date with the latest videos on the channel. Until next time, thank you for watching, everybody. My name's Geoff Fagien. I will see you in the next video.